Session really is around how can we reimagine a future where farmers are not only producers of food and fibre, but also producers of energy. You know, what might that look like? How do we make it happen? And the insights and ideas that come from this session will be taken to the Energy Charters Roundtable tomorrow morning to unpack further and come up with actions and accountabilities, and will be used to shape their future roundtables. If you'd like to, it's a free event to attend tomorrow morning. There's a QR code in the program if you'd like to register for that. So this session aims to broaden the conversation around the role that farmers currently play in the energy transition and whether they're taking advantage of the current opportunities. Farmers are in a unique position. They can be large users of energy, but also can be significant generators of energy. They have the land for large-scale solar wind developments, and they'll also be hosting transmission infrastructure. But how else could they be involved in the energy transition? I've invited the speakers on the panel today because I know they've all got some good ideas about what the future might look like. And for example, I was talking to Martin Amity from ANU, who's speaking in one of the breakout sessions, and he mentioned his colleague is looking into how in the future electric battery tractors, which are generally only used for 6 or 7 months a year, may be able to form a giant grid, a giant kind of network of mobile batteries to help firm the grid. So it's ideas like this that can be debated and explored so that we're ready and make sure that we're ready to grasp these types of opportunities as they come by. So after I introduce each of the panellists, I'll ask them to briefly outline the work they're involved in and what their ideas are for this topic before I start with some questions and then go to the audience for questions as well. I'd also like to invite you guys to respond to one another if you have something to say as well. It doesn't have to be so formal. So Methuen Morgan, I'll start with you. You're a respected academic in environmental psychology, specialising in behaviour change. And you've also created Meralli Solar, which focus on mid-scale solar installs, and I've just put an example up there. And plus you live in the New England Renewable Energy Zone. And I'm beginning with you because of the conversations you and I have had over the years about how do we use our mid-voltage distribution network better and potentially put in thousands of smaller 5 megawatt solar farms in place to power all of the east. You've said this can power all of the eastern seaboard. So that's a really compelling argument because more farmers could potentially benefit and we're using an existing asset more efficiently. So I'd like you to now give a quick intro into the work you're involved in and your thoughts on the topic.
Sure. Excuse me. Thank you, Karin. Meralli is literally a solar farm builder. We're one of those people. But we don't play in the big field. We've confined ourselves to the medium voltage network. And one of the reasons we've confined ourselves to that space is, A, we're obviously a smaller entity, but B, there's a whole transmission line network that already exists that doesn't require billions of dollars to be spent on, and it exists now. There's also 140,000 substations approximately in New South Wales alone, and we build these smaller solar farms, so they're about 8 megawatts DC with a 5 megawatt AC connection, and they just hook into the medium voltage network, and they take about 6 hectares in total with the security fence and everything. They cover about 6 hectares of solar farms. So with 140,000 substations, if you, let's say, 18% of the substations could facilitate such a solar farm, then you could effectively generate enough power from those solar farms alone, for that period of time that the sun's out, of course, to power the whole of Australia. And that's just one side of that equation. There's also the opportunity in those regional areas to have a smaller, cost-effective, efficient solar operation that can provide electricity to, as Professor Garno was talking about, or at least indicating this morning, that can be the power source of regional developments, renewing the economic prospects and potential within rural and regional spaces. We're starting to add batteries to some of these solar farms, and so, they're also dispatchable power plants in spaces. And I think that the opportunities in regional Australia are limited only by our imagination in this space. Sorry.
I was going to say, put the microphone a bit closer to your voice.
Sorry.
I think people can't hear at the back.
Yeah. I can pull it off.
Yeah, you can pull it off.
Okay.
Oh, that's better.
That better? Beautiful. And so, as I say, the opportunities to rural and regional Australia in this space are only limited to our imagination. We're, in fact, working on a project in our hometown of Meralli, which is on an industrial site. It's 21 hectares. It's going to have a connected solar generator with dispatchable battery power attached to it. But there's also going to be, and we're speaking with people now, who are going to put their businesses, or want to put businesses in this space, take advantage of the power that's coming from the solar farm, and or have their own little solar plants. And as a result of that, a little town like Meralli, there'll be potentially another 10 or 12 businesses down the track. Those jobs are all going to be, most of them will be new to the town, so there's the potential for people to come in, to work in these businesses. And of course, there's the economic benefit that to the township itself that potentially result from these sorts of developments. The other farms that we've built are owned by people, who have gone together in groups. So there's a group of farmers have got together and are building these solar farms, have built them. Some of them are attached to agri-businesses such as abattoirs, cotton gins and the like. So there is a whole host of opportunity for the agricultural space and renewable.
So those of you with the field trip ticket will be able to have a look at the operation and his happy sheep tomorrow. I know you also own two of your own 100 kilowatt solar systems that export directly to the grid, so I'd love you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, thanks, Karin. The solar farm that I host on my land has been now active for over 5 years. I've been involved in the process for nearly 10 after all of the research. The owner of the facility of the infrastructure is Methuen, and it's managed by NCOM. The statistics that come out are available quite readily. It's 53.6 hectares in size. Roughly about 1,050 panels per hectare, so you've got about 56,000 panels on that site. Recent information provides the site has given 73,000 homes energy over the 5 years. Quite amazing. And that produced 270,000 megawatts of electricity over the 5 years. The project there that's on my land is a double win for me. We still run merino sheep underneath without a problem, and in fact that has enhanced the productivity of the sheep and the grazing opportunity underneath. The panels are sun trackers, and that's sort of a stipulation, because if they're not sun trackers, then really you can't put ground mounted plants that can be used for grazing. So I sort of state that quite clearly. It's absolute, as I said, a win-win. I'm getting the rental, and I've actually got an improved grazing opportunity with the merino sheep. Under that particular area, we're running 180 merino ewes, and last year we had 100%, just a fraction over 100% of productivity from the ewes, so it was an absolute fantastic result. One of the things I also have is two 100 kilowatt systems located on my property that I own, and that is purely producing electricity for the grid. We also actually have a deal that sells the excess energy over and above the FIT rate, which we all know has gone down substantially over the period. But I actually work with a company from Melbourne, and we actually sell the energy on the spot market. The return on those small investments The investment was approximately $120,000 per unit, and they're returning in excess of 10% with the combined FIT plus the money from the spot market. I just encourage people across the board to combine agriculture and the production of electricity by the solar systems. If you can continue to run sheep, then there is absolutely no problem whatsoever. They're absolutely compatible, and more than happy to host any person who wants to come and have a look at the farm, have a look at what's happening out at my place, and that's happening tomorrow for those people who are interested in coming out. Yeah, happy to take questions.
Systems engineer and founded Alternate Energy Innovations and been working on some really innovative projects in Victoria, such as Willandra Farms. And we'll be hearing from Sandra about this at the end of the day. We've had conversations around farmers providing services to the grid in the future, such as flexible demand management. And you think this could be quite a lucrative secondary income for them. Can you explain your ideas about it and where you see the opportunities for farmers?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Yeah, my background is process control in large industry, and a couple of years ago a farmer asked me could we use renewables in irrigation on dairy farms. So when we started to look at that, as with all solar within agriculture, or certainly most of it, there's a big mismatch between the generation of solar and the variability of it and the way that energy is used, especially in fixed power irrigation. So what we did was analysis of their farm, and there were, Sandra will talk about that this afternoon, so I won't go into that in much detail. But if you put enough irrigation pieces together, you effectively create a jigsaw that allows you to optimise the use of renewables within irrigation. On the Willandra farm, we achieve about 90 to 95% usage of renewable on any single day, and we limit the grid usage to about less than 6% on peak. And 2 years ago, we cut their energy bill for irrigation from $81,000 to $1,000 in the year. This last year that's just gone, they had higher irrigation, and their bill's gone from about $100,000 to $15,000. It's basically done by optimising the way the irrigation system operates to utilise renewables. But there's a more of a benefit that we can see in these systems in where agriculture plays a large role in the energy market. A large part of that is in flexible demand management, because the key part of managing the grid in the future will be to be able to manage loads and turn them off quickly when the grid's in trouble. And there might even be occasions where there's high renewables in the system and you plan to irrigate tomorrow, where you might be able to bring it forward and irrigate today. So that can all be fully automated. The second area we're working in at the moment is with companies like Swan Systems that do irrigation scheduling management, where they can set a 5-day schedule based on the weather, moisture meters, forecast, the satellite imaging, and then that can automatically be transferred into our system that will optimise on a daily basis the cost of your energy for irrigation. During the non-irrigation season, we see a massive opportunities for agriculture to get involved in having behind-the-meter batteries. Not necessarily that agriculture has to own the battery, but certainly use the excess energy, put it into the battery behind the grid at no network cost, and then that battery can be involved in both network support and community power support. We see that being a big issue. We're from Gippsland in eastern Victoria. We've got a project going on at the moment called the Dairy Energy Gippsland 100 project, which involves putting solar and batteries behind 100 NIMIs on farms in Gippsland. That adds up, and 250 kilowatt hours of batteries or higher. On 100 farms, that ends up to somewhere between 10 and 15 megawatts of solar and 25 to 30 megawatt hours of batteries that anyone who drives through Gippsland will never see. So we don't have to have large solar farms, although we need them as well. It's interesting, in Gippsland in the last 5 years there's been 5 solar farm projects proposed that are greater than 10 megawatts, and at the moment unfortunately none have progressed. We certainly hope they do. But to do the approval of the project we're doing behind the meter on farms, we effectively need no approval. And we see this is the way that agriculture and energy can work together.
So you'd understand, if anyone, about the scale of what we need to do with our energy system over the coming years. I saw you nodding to what Methuen was talking about. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on how mid-scale renewables, such as those mentioned by the other panellists, might fit into achieving our renewables targets, if at all, and whether supporting smaller scale projects, such as those mentioned, might fit into a community-wide benefit for, that might enable the larger scale infrastructure projects.
Thanks, Karin. So certainly, so as a bit of context, I work for the Energy Corporation of New South Wales, and we're appointed as the infrastructure planner for the 5 renewable energy zones around the state, as well as a number of priority transmission infrastructure projects that are being developed in New South Wales. Just to give a sense of the scale of the challenge we're looking at, we're looking to more than double the installed network capacity of the New South Wales grid by 2040. And we're looking to bring on board almost a tripling in the level of installed distributed energy, so photovoltaics and the likes, that is currently installed. We currently have around about 7 gigawatts in New South Wales of rooftop solar, and we're looking at actually working to encourage the adoption of more distributed PV and other opportunities such as storage around the state. We're expecting to need around 25 gigs of distributed PV resources by 2040. So that's quite an opportunity in that mid-scale kind of range, and that includes both existing sort of rooftop solar programs, provided that they can be delivered in a smart and coordinated way, and there's a lot of very sophisticated models out there. But one of the benefits of the mid-scale projects that you've heard from the other panellists on is that they can contribute in a smart way and be integrated across regions to contribute to the grid and help with the supply. We will need the bulk supply going into the future, and this will help with that. Our primary remit at EnergyCo is really looking at that large-scale bulk supply and bulk distribution network that will actually underpin and support a lot of this transition in the regions. And will actually help to provide a lot of the capital investment in a lot of the underpinning roads and accommodation and skills and training and things like that that are coming to New South Wales regions to help to actually bring that here and build that here. And that will actually provide a range of flow-on effects. The other thing we're doing is, we've recently had a new government, and I've already had a number of conversations around what's happening in the local area. What are you doing in the local areas, both from supply chains, employment, working with people around, what local content can go in, working with the existing distributed network operators to look at what kind of opportunities there are for mid-scale grids and for community-run programs and inclusion in the program.
All of you have outlined some pretty exciting opportunities for farmers. What do you think is stopping more landholders from taking up these opportunities now?
Well, I'll take it on in part. I think in the area we're working on, I believe one of the biggest changes that can help agriculture and energy is to be able to do on-farm controlled microgrids, where you can put a central renewable energy system in, typically solar, but be able to use it across all NIMBYs on the farm. And that has benefit both to the farmer, but it also has benefits to the network, because in general you need about 20% less solar if you're able to do that, and you can use a higher percentage of it for a longer time, and that's good for the farmer and good for the network. So I think that's an area where if we could get legislation change in that area, that would be a big win across the board.
No, I agree with that.
I think a lot of it is about information and information sharing that's not adequate, and the process of getting some of the bigger solar farms in place is extremely laborious and difficult to get it up in the final stages. And I think a lot of people get tired of it and walk away from it in the end, despite the fact that a lot of the work has been done and a lot of the work has been supported. Obviously there are people who don't want large-scale solar in their backyard, which is okay. But I think, as Dr. Garno said, there are people who are willing to have it in their backyard, and I think they should be focused upon.
I think it also helps when the benefits of large-scale developments are really clearly articulated early on to communities, so that the people that are maybe sitting on the fence about having large-scale infrastructure near them can at least understand what the net benefit could be to them, and they're clear on what the impacts are going to be as well.
Could I add just two? I'm very interested in the Meralli one at Uralla, because right here in Dubbo we're actually progressing on a behind the meter process here, where we'll be providing with an additional solar farm off-grid supply of electricity to more than 350 industrial sites. That's actually being developed as we speak, and with support of Dubbo Regional Council, Essential Energy and all the players are coming on board. So again, that's agriculture with the small 5 megawatt system, possibly to be enlarged, but that will be supporting the industrial sector here in town as well, in Dubbo.
Methuen?
Yes, sorry. I missed the question, if indeed there was one, but the comment is, ours will be much the same. It's a similar sort of renewables energy hub, if you will, light industrial hub. And certainly, we're fortunate in that space because the whole industrial site is on one lot. So any of the end users, we're not crossing a lot boundary, so we don't run into the issue with Essential in that space. And so certainly to date we've had the support from the Uralla Shire Council, and certainly the community has been rallying behind us as well to try and progress that, for the very simple reason that, as you said, there's a whole host of economic flow-on effects that will manifest themselves. If there's another 10 or 12 families come into the district, they're looking for a house, they're going to need to feed their kids and educate their kids and so on. So, they sort of see this as an opportunity to revitalise because it's local and it's small. In contrast, and it's going to sound like I'm down on some of the big solar farms, and I'm not, they have a place, but at the moment there have been some big developments occur in the Uralla and the New England area, and it reminds me of what happened, and some of the effects remind me of what happened with the coal seam gas extraction days up in Queensland. With these big projects come lots of glowworms, people in high vis, new people, there's social dislocation occurs within the communities, and so the big farms can get a bit of a bad rap in that space if they're not really careful, and they run the risk of destroying or at least severely impacting their social licence if they're not very careful about how those developments are handled. Little ones like ours, well, we've got a small team. They're made up primarily of locals, but even at the best we've got 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 people working, and we can control their behaviour after hours and those sorts of things. And there's a whole different sort of social sort of impact from our type of operations, but that project is truly being supported by the local council and businesses. Yeah.
So just as far as buying into the broader program, and I'm taking on board the commentary regarding the mid-scale in particular. I think one of the big challenges we have is that there is a lot of information out there. There's a lot of different voices out there. You're hearing from a range of different developers, a range of different programs are being run, and trying to actually sort of siphon through that is quite a piece of work. This is a big transition. It's a revolution in the way that the state is actually generating and distributing its energy resources, and so there's a lot to take on. And I think that helping farmers to actually understand what opportunities they have, and that will vary depending on your site. I'm not going to preach to the converted here. You all know that you operate your properties in different ways, and you utilise the best parts of your properties for different activities. And so really working to actually understand the breadth of opportunities, because there are the grid scale opportunities, not everywhere in the right places, but there are also the local mid-scale opportunities. And then there's other opportunities that may have nothing to do with generation, but might be to do with, storing batteries and strategically located assets on important parts of the grid that can provide a strategic load benefit, or there might be other opportunities around carbon sequestration, which you've heard today, and biodiversity offsets, so utilising parts of your property that may not otherwise be used to actually secure another income stream or a diversified income stream for your land. That can contribute to a broader program because those kind of activities are needed, but it may not necessarily be hosting the infrastructure. So I think it's around getting the information out there around how all these different things interplay, because I think there's a lot happening in this space and it can be challenging. And I think the other final challenge is around understanding some of the grid connections and the existing network capacities, because I think one of the big challenges is that the existing network is at its limits. We need to build more if we're going to do progress with this transition. And so where are those new infrastructure assets needed, and how can mid-scale farm by farm contribute in a smart way to that distributed network?
Just on that note, and I suppose this goes particularly to the Energy Code, but we've heard from Ross today that we can decentralise and have industry in towns, regions like Dubbo, Wagga, Shepparton, wherever. To me, the powers come here historically from a centralised system, but if we move industry out here and create new industry out here, like Ross shared earlier today in production of urea, hydrogen, all of those sort of things, the demand on the grid, therefore, is nowhere near as great, because the power that's generated here is consumed here. You've then got a transportation issue, so any export in power, rather than upgrading the grid, why would you not electrify your rail network to then transport whatever goods need to go back into your ports or cities for consumption, rather than spend billions of dollars on upgrading the grid? The grid's already serving where we are now. The power's got here. The power can go back. Now, obviously, it's not going to go back at the same rate as it comes out. I understand that side. But if you move industry to here, you can shift the whole paradigm, and if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I just like your commentary around that, because what we've got up here on the panel today is the capacity for, all different innovation capacity for us to generate locally, different sources. We've got solar up there on the panel, but there's other sources of energy generation that are available. Let's decentralise not just the energy, but let's decentralise totally and get some secondary production, here in Dubbo, instead of carting raw cotton into the town to be put through a gin miles away. Let's make it happen here and consume that energy here.
Yeah, so look, I agree. We really view that the renewable energy zones aren't just a place to generate energy. We've been quite clear that we actually see these areas, and that they're big areas. The Central West Arana res is over 20,000 square kilometres, but we see these areas as having a real opportunity to harness locally generated energy. The way that the current grid works is really with the dominant sort of 3/4 of the grid coming from the coal-fired power stations in Lithgow and the Lower Hunter. You really have it branching out like a tree, if I can use that analogy, whereby the power has been traditionally generated in those two areas and sent outward in the distribution. We're now at a position where the best advice we have is that we need to actually seek to provide distributed generation across large areas that can then filter back. So there's a range of upgrades needed both to actually facilitate these grid scale projects coming on in these areas, and this is statewide, as well as providing strengthening works in areas that have traditionally been backed up by coal-fired power. So there are areas where the coal-fired power stations between them needs to be strengthened, because the existing grid cannot actually cope with the power that needs to go back through for existing businesses already running in those areas. So there's a need to actually maintain the base load, so the 12 gigawatt base load that is being produced by those coal-fired power stations for existing industry. And then there's the opportunities to grow and develop new industries and new energy-intensive industries such as manufacturing, canneries, local processing, local greenhouses and high energy-intensive opportunities that can then capitalise on, emerging green and blue economy markets. And we see a real role for that locally in areas where there is good, strong renewable energy generation capability. But that would be complementary. I think I mentioned earlier we're looking to double the installed network capacity around the state. Part of that is about keeping the lights on for businesses and schools and port export facilities and hospitals and the likes that already operate. And then there's a growth phase, and that's where we can really accommodate those emerging additional opportunities and really harness them and bring more local content to regions. So it's a dovetail.
Can I add to that? And I know I'm about to sound like I really am canning out the res zones, and I'm not. I don't mean to be. But the conversations I've had with people, in both the res areas and around the place is that it seems like the big multinationals and the big businesses are all coming to town and they're going to build these things, and these transmission lines, the high voltage transmission lines, are all about getting power back into the populated areas, and we need the big companies to build these 2 and 3 and 4 and whatever 100 megawatt solar farms, and the money's going to be earned here and flow back out to Pitt Street or Singapore or wherever, and the bush is going to just get lumbered with hosting them. So, I take the point that you make about the opportunities, and I get that, but that's still a perception that exists, rightly or wrongly. And I suppose the medium voltage network, which is different to the high voltage transmission lines, already exists. It's already owned by us, and the New South Wales governments to date haven't really focused on a great deal. And I had a meeting with Matt Keane when he was the Energy Minister, and we asked, what was the plan with the medium voltage network? And the answer was at that time, and this is 2 or 3 years ago, we haven't looked at it. Now, I'm assuming 2 or 3 years have passed, and there obviously has been some investigation in that space, but it just doesn't seem to be a lot of support in that space, that's all. And, when we build these things and we have to upgrade the line to the substation, it's the proponent's privilege to pay for all that and then donate it back to Essential Energy, which is, you can spend $700,000 or $800,000 and you've got to gift it back to Essential. It almost feels like sometimes that there's not a real serious intent in that medium voltage network. Is that right, or is it just my disturbed perception, which could be reasonable?
So, look, I didn't mean to do that. There we go. So I take the point, and I...
Sorry, I'll try to get someone to look at it.
Okay, no worries. Apologies, everybody, if I blast your ears off. So I appreciate the challenges. Can I move around?
You can come and speak here.
All right. So,
I did it.
okay. Am I good now? Okay. So look, I do appreciate the challenges in the local distribution grids, and that's something that we've been having conversations with Essential Energy about. I think that there is a need to sort of engage more on what the purpose of the RESs are. We're facing a situation where we are looking to have 4 of the 5 major coal-fired power stations turn off in the next 10 years. So we are facing frankly, a very large depletion in energy supply in the grid. So we do need that bulk supply, and this is where I sort of said before, there's a complement.
There's just one Ragini over there. Oh.
Good morning, Robin Doyle. I'm with ACEN Australia, New England Solar Farm. I've got a question for you, Tom. We're just in the process of introducing sheep under our panels, and we've been liaising with the landowners quite a bit, and a couple of things have come up. One of those is lambing ewes under the panels, and the other one was that we've seen that with research and everything I've read about what you're doing, the quality of the wool has improved, but does it affect the meat? Can you help me out with that? Thanks.
Couldn't quite hear the whole question, but the quality of wool definitely had improved with less vegetable matter and less contaminants, etc., because of the nature of the pasture improvement that happened under the solar farms. There has been a net increase in productivity. Approximately, that's the total financial aspect of about 15% compared to the control group that I run right beside. So that can be validated. With respect to lambing ewes, we haven't had an issue at all. And one of the advantages there is that we've been able to control the numbers, etc., of foxes because of the very limited access with the security fence right around it. And also being close to Dubbo with domestic dogs that go on the prowl. But that has been quite easily and far better managed in a farming type situation than it was previously before the solar farm. I wasn't quite sure of the other part of the question.
The other part was, sorry about that, was that the quality of the meat. So does it affect the meat in any way, as you know, with meat sheep, or are you generally just doing for wool?
Absolutely no impact whatsoever. The quality of the animals, we've had merinos. I had merino wethers on there previously, and then we swapped over to ewes because it was more productive. And there was they actually got sold through, when I sold them, all of them went to Fletcher's, and there was no issue whatsoever with the meat. The only thing that we did have was we had to change the shearing times. We shear sheep here between 9.5 and 10 months to keep the wool length down because of the nature of the solar system and the turning system of the arrays. It had a PTO drive through the middle, and we had some injuries with sheep early on. Now there is zero injury because we actually shear the sheep with the wool being shorter, and that hasn't come back.
Okay, one last quick question and quick answer as well.
Yeah, just wanted to say thank you. And Tom, I like the idea of it being a and rather than an or. So the agricultural benefits and the generating electricity, I think it's a great conversation to have. And it's not a mainstream conversation yet. The other thing that I feel like that's missing from these conversations is the waste management issue. So how is that being managed with regards to solar panels and the fact that landfill capacity is diminishing? So how is that captured into this and the recycling that needs to happen?
We've actually got our own PV recycling expert here with the mic. Where is she? Megan. Oh, she's just gone outside. Oh, it's a shame. If you want the one that was running around with the mic, you can ask her in the break maybe, but...
Do you want me to jump in and start? So look, waste is a big question, and capacities in municipal landfills in all regional parts of New South Wales is a challenge. One of the things we're working on as part of the res network infrastructure that we're developing is to basically require the generators that are going to be connecting to those new assets. So we manage our connections slightly different to existing network infrastructure. And one of the requirements of that will be to conform with improved management for waste. Now that doesn't mean no waste, but it does mean that with the bulk scale you're looking at statewide with the energy transition, you are looking at tens of gigawatts worth of new generation. And so with that comes an additional level of scale, which will help in some of the recycling aspects. But there's also requirements that are being imposed on these generators, both through their commercial agreements, but also we work very closely with other parts of government, such as the EPA and the Department of Planning, around what the approval standards should be for these developments, and looking to first and foremost minimise the amount of waste that is needed up front during construction, so through things like allowing for recyclable or biodegradable packaging, and then managing replacement throughout the life of project, and working at the decommissioning stage to provide both greater information for landowners about what decommissioning might look like. It's particularly a large concern in the wind industry, for host landowners around what kind of liability will be left. But both large-scale solar and large-scale wind, the decommissioning aspects would principally be governed through that approval document, but there are other mechanisms we're using to make sure that those proponents are acting as model proponents with their host landowners when they are actually doing their waste minimisation at the end.
Okay, we're going to just end it there unless somebody's got very quick response.
Just on that one, there is interest currently in this region here for a major recycling plant for panels, etc., in relation to PV systems, who want to actually locate in Dubbo to be part of the REZ here. One thing I'd actually say is that, to me, there's a dichotomy. One is supplying energy to the coast and the population and business that's over there. The other one is the real opportunity for farmers to actually have microgrids and to actually have a different system that's sort of local and designed specifically for purpose. And I think that's where the challenge is that we face as farmers.
Thank you very much. Please put your hands together for our panel.